Welcome back to the Cauldron, lovelies. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for your time and thank you for your energy. I hope today finds you safe, happy, and well. I'd like to give a hearty welcome to all of our new followers and a big thank you to those of you who have been following this little witchy podcast from the beginning. It warms my heart knowing that so many of you are finding some value on what this old crone has to say. It's hard to believe I've been practicing witchcraft for over 25 years. And in that time, I've certainly learned a lot along the way. I've stumbled a lot along the way, too. Like a lot. And while there are things I will say with confidence, I know there is still so much more to learn because this witch will forever be a student of the craft. I also don't pretend to have all the answers because if I'm being honest, there are days when I feel like a super wise elder, confident about what she knows. And other days, I feel like a neurospicy hot mess of a witch who still has to reach for a book as a reminder every now and again. That's what makes the journey worth taking, at least for me anyway, the learning and the growing in my practice. But here, in my little corner of the internet, I get to share my thoughts and feelings about how witchcraft and everyday life intersect, all while creating these beautiful connections with other like minded people. We may not all walk the same path in the same way, but it's a thread that connects us to one another and separates us from the mundane world. And today's topic is one that I know a lot of witches have a very different opinion on when it comes to their own practice. Today's podcast title asks a broad question. Is magic always the answer? Let me ask you this. Do you think every problem that we encounter in our lives has a magical solution? If so, do you think we always need to use it? Let's talk about what sparked today's conversation and how sometimes the magical solution we think we need may not be the one we need at all. Recently, I was invited to join a Witchcraft for Beginners group on Facebook. To be honest, I thought I was joining a smaller group formed by another creator I follow on the platform. Boy, was I wrong. Somehow, I found myself in a beginner witchcraft group with over 80,000 people in it. And while I have nothing but love for new brooms, a group of this size can really take on a life of its own because the energy isn't always well maintained and the group isn't always well moderated. But in the spirit of being able to share a little wisdom with those who genuinely want to learn and don't want everything spoon fed to them, because I'm definitely not here for that, I decided to stick around for a little while to see what's what. And hey, this old girl is always willing to learn a thing or two, so why not? As I was scrolling along, I happened upon a post that caught my attention. Normally, I scroll right by a post like this because the topic can become heated for a number of reasons, and I just don't have the energy for it most of the time. An anonymous poster came to the group asking for help with what she described as a complicated relationship situation. She wanted a spell or ritual that would essentially remove another woman from a relationship involving a man she was also involved with. She was clear that she didn't want to interfere with anyone's free will. She just wanted something that would, in her words, make this woman go away. And I'm reading this thinking, huh, because immediately this witch's eyebrows are starting to raise. So let me get this straight. You don't want to mess with anyone's free will, but you want a spell to make her go away against her will? I have so many questions. And of course, the comment section is split on what's the best course of action for this complicated relationship situation. My witchy intuition is telling me the situation is not as it appears to be, and I'm not the only one in the comments who recognizes it either. Deeper in the comments, we learn that she has known him for 30 years, but has only recently reconnected with him and has started this complicated relationship situation. The divide in the comments seems to be, generally speaking, people making suggestions to aid her in her request, and on the other side are people offering the suggestion that the man she wants for herself is not being honest with her or the other woman involved. The poster defends her position, saying, I know him well enough to say that he's telling the truth. But do you really, though? Do you really? Because of what is being asked here, I believe what is actually true is important in this situation. And here I will invite you to pause for a moment and think about the situation as it's been described to you. What would you suggest to this poster? Do you have a magical working that immediately comes to mind? Is there a mundane solution that might be offered as a better pathway to the end result she is looking for? Or is the end result even something that's obtainable? Notice I didn't ask, is the end result something that should be obtained? Because despite my feelings about the situation is not mine to work. Now, I recognize that it's entirely possible that I am misreading the situation at hand. As someone who has been betrayed by the person she trusted the most in this lifetime, perhaps my own judgment is clouded here a little bit. So, I took a step back, put my own feelings aside, and offered her this. Perhaps the magical working you need is one that might help you see the situation more clearly. Because sometimes where matters of the heart are concerned, our intuition loses its voice. And what we may know at a soul level to be true, we ignore. And I believe that any time we employ spell work as a means to an end, we need to be certain we are in alignment with what we want, why we want it, and what the desired outcome is. Because if we aren't, what might arrive at our doorstep might not be what we asked for. And we need to be willing to accept responsibility for that. Circling back to the conversation in this group, I offered the poster a suggestion for a magical working. I didn't offer her the working itself. And I will not. Because here is one of the places where I have created strong boundaries around how I practice the craft. I am extremely careful about creating energetic ties to workings, people, and situations that aren't mine. Looking at the complicated relationship situation at hand, and all the other people who are now involved in the conversation who have offered actual workings, think about all the energetic ties that have been created in this situation. We have the original poster. We have the man involved. We have the other woman and her children. We have the witches who have provided the spell work. We have the witnesses to the workings being offered. Oof. That is a lot of people tied to one situation where, in my opinion, there is still way too many unknowns at play. Now, earlier I asked you what solution you had in mind. Has your solution to the problem changed given new information? Because the more I learned about the situation, the less comfortable I became with the idea that anyone could confidently say, yep, this is the working you need. Every new piece of information seemed to create another question. And at some point, I started wondering whether anyone had stopped to consider the person all of this magic was actually being directed toward. Had anyone at all taken into consideration that this other woman is not as she is being characterized? What had she actually done as far as we know? We hadn't heard her side of the story. We don't know what she knows about the relationship she's in. Hell, we don't even know if she knows the original poster exists. And now we know there are children involved. Does this change anything for you? And yet somehow she has become the person we're discussing magically removing from the situation. That's where I start getting uncomfortable. What if this other woman is a loving and devoted partner who is completely unaware that her partner is involved with the original poster? What if this other woman is going about her day, living her best life with this man, thinking there is absolutely nothing wrong in their relationship, all the while this man is making her out to be a monster? And if we don't know which version of this story is true, how comfortable are we directing magic towards someone who may have done absolutely nothing wrong? The fact that we don't know is exactly why I think this deserves more consideration than simply deciding who needs to go. And this is where I think the conversation gets even more complicated, because where we draw the line around consent in our magical practices can look very different from witch to witch. So, where is yours? Let's say you put protection words around your home. You haven't obtained consent from everyone who might encounter them. If someone approaches your home with ill intent and your words are intended to repel that person, you've created a working that potentially affects somebody else. Are you okay with that? What about protection work for the people you love? Do you include your spouse, your children, or your family in protection work without asking every time? What about an adult child? A friend? Does your relationship to that person change where you draw your line? What about healing? Would you perform healing magic for someone who hasn't asked for it? Some witches absolutely will. Others won't without explicit consent. Maybe you're someone who leaves room in the working for that person to accept or reject what is being offered. What about binding? If someone is actively causing harm, are you comfortable magically restricting their ability to continue? Does preventing harm outweigh your concern about interfering with their free will or banishing? What if someone is making your life miserable? Are you comfortable magically removing them from your own space or circumstances without their consent? And does that feel different to you from trying to remove them from somebody else's relationship? Maybe you're listening to all these examples and realizing that your line isn't actually consent. Maybe it's intent. Maybe the line is harm. Maybe it's necessity. Maybe it's whether or not the situation directly involves you. Or maybe consent is your line and you don't perform magical workings involving another person without it. There isn't one answer I'm trying to lead you toward here. What I'm asking you to consider is whether you know where your line is, and more importantly, why you put it there. For me, whether or not the situation is mine to work carries a lot of weight. That's part of why this particular situation made me so uncomfortable. Because wherever your line happens to be, I think there's another question worth asking. How much do you need to know before you're willing to cross it? And if we are okay with magical workings that involve others without their consent, what responsibility do we have to establish what we actually know to be true before directing magic action toward another person? because it seemed like there were a lot of people who were comfortable with offering a spell to send this woman packing without giving it another thought. Whose free will is more important here? And while I will always advocate for building a practice that is yours and understand the importance of deciding for ourselves how we should practice, this type of situation challenges this a bit because it's not just our practice that's involved here. I'm not even sure that the original poster is a practicing witch. And handing a magical working to someone who doesn't know what they're doing isn't building a practice at all. And again, I don't know the original poster, but that's the point, isn't it? In my mind, it's energetically very, very messy. And if you're the person handing a beginner a working, particularly one intended to affect somebody else, what responsibility do you have to make sure they understand what you're giving them? If someone comes to you and says, I have this problem, give me a spell, and the response is just, here's a cord cutting, here's a road opener, here's a banishing, do this, use these ingredients, say these words, what have you helped this person achieve? There is so much that goes into spell work, and it's not just the ingredients and the words on the paper. What happens if the spell doesn't work? If all they know is put this in a jar, light this candle, say these words, do they know how to troubleshoot it? Do they immediately go looking for a stronger spell? What happens when it does work, but differently than expected? Do they understand that getting the desired outcome doesn't necessarily mean getting it in the way they imagined? What responsibility does the practitioner have after the candle burns out? Because magic doesn't necessarily remove the need to have the conversation, leave the relationship, or whatever the situation requires. And I think that's something we sometimes forget when we start looking for a magical solution to a problem. We still have to be willing to do the mundane work that goes along with it. And when I bring that back around to the situation that started this whole conversation, I have another question. What mundane action is actually available here, and whose responsibility is it to take it? Because if this man truly wants out of this relationship as badly as the original poster says he does, why are we looking for a spell to remove this woman? Why isn't he leaving? If his partner is manipulative and controlling, that's a serious claim. And there is absolutely situations where leaving a relationship is complicated, frightening, financially difficult, or unsafe. But this is exactly it. We don't know. The Facebook witches don't know. The original poster may not know. And yet people were comfortable directing magical action towards the one person in this entire story whose version of events nobody has even heard. What if, instead of asking, how do I make her go away? We asked, what is preventing him from making the choice he says he wants to make? Because those lead to completely different responses. If he's genuinely trapped or unsafe, maybe the appropriate support is helping him find safety, not attacking the other woman magically based on a secondhand account. If he's lying, clarity becomes pretty darn useful in this situation. If he's conflicted and doesn't actually want to leave, again, clarity serves the original poster well in this situation. If the original poster simply wants an outcome he isn't willing to choose, no amount of magic changes the fact that she's trying to make a decision for somebody else. Perhaps before we start moving people around the energetic chessboard, we need to be sure we understand what game is actually being played in the first place. And maybe that's really what I want you to take away from today's conversation. Magic is an incredible tool It can help us create change, protect what matters to us, open roads, close doors, heal, release, and transform. But having magic available to us doesn't mean that every situation requires us to use it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is wait. Ask another question. Look at ourselves. Pay attention to what our intuition has been trying to tell us. Do the mundane work. And sometimes, maybe the magical working we need isn't the one that changes the situation at all. Maybe it's the one that helps us see the situation clearly enough to decide what comes next. I told you at the beginning of this episode that this witch will forever be a student of the craft. And this conversation reminded me why. Because after more than 25 years, I still have moments that make me stop and examine my own boundaries. Moments that make me ask why I believe what I believe and whether the way I practice is still aligned with those beliefs. And I hope you never stop doing that either. So, is magic always the answer? For me, no. Sometimes the answer is magic. Sometimes the answer is mundane. And sometimes the answer is simply having the wisdom to wait until you know which one you actually need. Until next time, stay steady, stay grounded, stay magical. Blessed be.